The farmer's gamble. The worthless planet. Nobody wanted Kepler 442f. The Galactic survey marked it as unsuitable for colonization in big red letters. Too cold, they said. Soil too poor. Atmosphere too thin. The Galactic Trade Union called it a rock floating in space, not worth the fuel to visit. But Farmer James Mitchell saw something different when he looked at the data. He saw home. "You're insane," his daughter Emma said when he showed her the purchase papers. "Dad, you spent our entire savings on a frozen dirt ball that even the mining corporations rejected." James smiled, his weathered face crinkling. "Your mother always said I had dirt in my veins instead of blood. This planet has good bones, Emma. I can feel it." The transport ship dropped them off with their equipment and left immediately, the captain muttering about wasted trips. James, Emma, and a small crew of 5 stood on the gray surface of Kepler 442f, watching their ride disappear into the stars. "Well," said Miguel, their engineer. "We're either brave or stupid." "Both," Emma muttered, but she was already unpacking the atmospheric processors. Breaking new ground. The first year was brutal. The temperature never rose above freezing. Their crops died within weeks. The soil rejected every seed they planted. Emma wanted to call for rescue 3 times, but James refused. "We're missing something," he said one night, studying soil samples under their habitat's dim lights. Earth's soil didn't start out perfect. It took billions of years of life dying and enriching it. "We need to think differently." He spent weeks analyzing the planet's composition. The soil wasn't just poor, it was chemically locked. Minerals that plants needed were trapped in crystal structures that Earth-based life couldn't access. "What if we don't try to change the planet?" James proposed to his skeptical team. "What if we change how we farm?" He began modifying their seeds, not with complex genetic engineering, but with simple hybridization techniques his grandfather had taught him. He mixed Earth crops with hardy samples they'd collected from other colony worlds. He experimented with bacterial cultures that could break down the crystal structures. Most attempts failed. But some didn't. The breakthrough. Month 14 brought their first success. A patch of modified wheat sprouted, grew, and actually thrived. The stalks were dark purple instead of golden, adapted to Kepler 442f's dimmer sun. But they produced grain. "It's not much," Emma admitted, holding a handful of the purple wheat. "Maybe enough to feed us, but not enough to export." James wasn't discouraged. "Every forest starts with one tree, Emma." They expanded carefully, learning the planet's rhythms. They discovered that Kepler 442f's long seasons, each lasting 2 Earth years, actually allowed for deeper root growth. Their modified crops could tap into mineral deposits far below the surface. The cold slowed growth but produced denser, more nutritious grains. By year 3, they had 50 acres under cultivation. By year 5, 500. Word began spreading through the agricultural networks. Mitchell's farm on Kepler 442f was producing yields that shouldn't be possible. Not just surviving, but thriving. The visitors arrive. The Zenthuri arrived without warning. Their massive biodome ships descended on Kepler 442f's northern continent, and within hours, perfect climate-controlled farms sprouted under shimmering energy shields. Ambassador Torval visited James personally. The Zenthuri were tall, crystalline beings who had perfected agricultural technology over 10,000 years. "Your efforts are admirable," Torval said, his voice like singing glass. "But unnecessary. Our biodomes can produce 100 times your yield with 1/10 the resources. We will feed this sector efficiently." James nodded slowly. "Your technology is impressive. Then you will sell us your land. We offer fair compensation. You can retire comfortably on any paradise world." "No, thank you." Torval's crystalline features flickered with confusion. "You refuse? But our methods are superior in every measurable way." "Maybe so," James agreed. "But your biodomes are closed systems. They're efficient, but they're fragile. One power failure, one dome breach, and everything inside dies. Our crops are part of this planet now. They're adapted to it. They're sustainable. Sustainability is irrelevant when efficiency is absolute, Torval replied. Over the next 2 years, the Zenthari proved their point. Their biodome farms produced incredible amounts of food. They fed 3 nearby systems with ease. Their technology was flawless. James kept farming his way, slowly expanding, carefully adapting. His yields were a fraction of the Zenthari's, but his costs were almost nothing. No expensive domes. No massive power requirements. Just soil, seed, and patient work. The crisis begins. The plague started on Zenthar Prime, the Zenthari homeworld. A microscopic organism, probably picked up from some cargo shipment, found its way into their biodome networks. It spread through their climate control systems like wildfire. Within 3 months, every Zenthari biodome in the sector was contaminated. The plague didn't hurt the Zenthari themselves, but it devastated their crops. Everything inside the domes withered and died. Ambassador Torval returned to Mitchell's farm, his crystalline form now dimmed with exhaustion. "We need food," he said simply. "Our biodomes are compromised. It will take years to sterilize and rebuild them. Millions will starve." James looked out over his purple wheat fields, swaying in Kepler 442f's thin wind. "How much time do we have?" 6 months before our reserves run out." "That's not enough time to teach you our methods," Emma said, joining them. "Your people don't know how to farm like this." Torval's form flickered with what might have been shame. "We have forgotten. Our technology replaced the old knowledge. We are efficient, but as you said, Farmer Mitchell, we are fragile." James made a decision that would change everything. "We'll feed you. But not just from our farms. We're going to teach every Zenthari who wants to learn how to do what we do. Real farming. Slow, patient, sustainable farming." The partnership forms. The next 6 months transformed both species. Hundreds of Zenthari came to Kepler 442f, setting aside their advanced technology to learn from James and his team. They planted seeds with their crystalline hands. They studied soil composition the old-fashioned way. They learned to read weather patterns and understand crop rotation. It was humbling for a species that had perfected efficiency. But it was also revelatory. "I have not touched raw soil in 300 years, one elderly Zenthari told James, running his fingers through the purple-tinged dirt. "I had forgotten how it feels. How it lives." Miguel led teams across Kepler 442f's empty continents, establishing new farms with mixed human Zenthari crews. Emma developed training programs, teaching the ancient techniques James had learned from his grandfather, adapted for alien biologies. The harvests came in just as Zenthari food reserves hit critical levels. It wasn't nearly enough to feed everyone, but it was enough to prevent disaster. More importantly, by then, 100 new farms were starting up across Zenthari-controlled worlds, using Earth techniques adapted to local conditions. James stood in his fields as the first snow of the season began to fall, watching Zenthari and humans working side by side, harvesting purple wheat that would feed millions. "We didn't save them with better technology," Emma said beside him. "We saved them with older technology." "No," James corrected gently. "We saved them by remembering that efficiency isn't everything. Sometimes the slow way is the sustainable way. Sometimes the old knowledge is the most valuable knowledge." As the snow fell on Kepler 442f, covering fields that nobody had wanted, that everyone had called worthless, James Mitchell smiled. His gamble had paid off in ways he never imagined. But the real harvest was yet to come, seeds of tomorrow. The Galactic shift. 3 years after the crisis, the Galactic Agricultural Council met on Kepler 442f for the first time. Species from across the sector gathered not in some advanced space station, but in a simple barn that James and his team had built. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Council leader Vexmore, an insectoid being from the Hive Collective, addressed the assembly. We are here to discuss the Mitchell proposal. Farmer Mitchell, please present your plan. James stood, feeling out of place among ambassadors and corporate representatives who controlled entire agricultural systems. But Emma squeezed his hand, and he found his voice. The Zenthari crisis taught us something important, he began. Our advanced farming systems, biodomes, hydroponics, orbital gardens, they're all incredible. But they all share one weakness. They're disconnected from the planets they're on. They're machines that could be anywhere, producing food without really understanding the land. He pulled up a holographic display, showing Kepler 442f before and after. This planet was worthless. No one wanted it. But it had potential that our surveys missed. Not potential to be transformed into Earth, but potential to be itself. When we worked with the planet instead of against it, when we adapted our crops to the land instead of trying to force the land to accept our crops, we found something sustainable. This is too slow, interrupted a corporate representative from AgriCorp, humanity's largest farming corporation. Your methods take years to establish. Our systems can be deployed in weeks. And destroyed in days, Torval added quietly, his crystalline form now bright with recovered health. We learned that lesson painfully. The resistance. Not everyone was convinced. The agricultural corporations saw James's proposal as a threat to their business model. If planets started developing their own sustainable farms instead of buying corporate food packages, profits would plummet. They launched a campaign against what they called primitive farming. They funded studies showing the inefficiency of James's methods. They argued that returning to old techniques would lead to famine and poverty. They're right about one thing, Emma admitted during a strategy session. We can't feed the galaxy this way. Not quickly. But we don't need to feed everyone, Miguel pointed out. We just need to teach planets to feed themselves. That became their mission. James and his team began traveling from world to world, teaching communities how to work with their local conditions instead of fighting them. They showed colonists on ice planets how to grow cold-loving crops. They helped desert world farmers develop drought-resistant strains. They taught asteroid miners how to create small, sustainable gardens in artificial caves. It was slow work. Painstaking work. But it was spreading. The second crisis. The validation came unexpectedly. A massive solar flare wiped out communications and power grids across 6 systems. Corporate food shipments stopped. Biodomes lost power. Hydroponics facilities went dark. Within days, panic spread as people realized how dependent they'd become on just-in-time food delivery. But the planets that had adopted Mitchell's methods barely noticed. Their farms didn't need power grids. Their crops were adapted to local conditions, so they survived weather disruptions. Their food was local, so supply chains didn't matter. Kepler 442f, the worthless planet, ended up sending aid to wealthy core worlds. This is embarrassing, said Admiral Chen, coordinator of the relief effort, during a visit to Mitchell's farm. We've got colony worlds feeding Earth. Maybe that's how it should be, James replied. Every world developing its own strengths instead of depending on central systems. The revolution takes root. The solar flare crisis changed public opinion overnight. People began demanding food security, not just food efficiency. Planetary governments started funding sustainable agriculture programs. Even the corporations, seeing the writing on the wall, began investing in long-term farming systems. The Torres Institute, named after the researcher who had helped James develop his early crop modifications, opened branches on 40 worlds. They researched local conditions, developed adapted species, and taught sustainable techniques to anyone who wanted to learn. Emma became the Institute's director, traveling between worlds and coordinating research. Miguel led engineering teams that developed low-tech but robust farming equipment. The original crew from Kepler 442f became teachers, spreading out across the galaxy. James stayed on Kepler 442f, still farming, still experimenting, still learning from the land. The unexpected honor. 5 years after the solar flare crisis, James received a message that shocked him. The Galactic Trade Union, the same organization that had marked Kepler 442f as worthless, wanted to award him the Stellar Achievement Medal. "I don't need a medal," he told Emma. "It's not about you, Dad," she replied. "It's about what you represent." They're finally admitting that they were wrong. The ceremony was held on Kepler 442f. Thousands attended in person, millions more watched via broadcasts. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in fields of purple wheat, swaying in the thin atmosphere. Ambassador Torval presented the medal. "Farmer Mitchell, you saved my people. But more than that, you taught us something we had forgotten. That technology should serve life, not replace it. That efficiency without sustainability is just temporary success. That sometimes the wisdom of the past holds the keys to the future." James accepted the medal, feeling its weight. But he knew the real prize was all around him: fields of thriving crops, adapted to their world, sustainable for generations. The legacy grows. The movement continued to spread. Mitchell farming, as it became known, wasn't just about crops. It was a philosophy. Work with nature, not against it. Adapt to local conditions. Build sustainability over efficiency. Think in generations, not quarters. Young people across the galaxy began choosing farming careers again, seeing them not as backward but as frontier work. Each planet was a new puzzle to solve, a new environment to understand, a new partnership between people and land to forge. The agricultural corporations adapted, some grudgingly, others enthusiastically. They began funding long-term planetary adaptation research. They developed technologies that supported sustainable farming rather than replacing it. Some even broke up their massive operations into locally managed farms. The next generation. 10 years after James first set foot on Kepler 442f, Emma stood in the same spot where he had looked at the gray, frozen landscape and seen potential. But now she saw thriving farms stretching to the horizon, worked by humans and Zenthari and dozens of other species, all learning together. Her own daughter, just 5 years old, knelt beside James in the purple wheat, learning to check soil moisture by touch. "Grandpa," the girl asked, "why is our wheat purple instead of yellow like in the pictures?" James smiled. "Because this is Kepler 442f wheat, not Earth wheat. It adapted to be what this planet needed. Just like we did." Miguel approached, now gray-haired but still energetic. "James, we've got another delegation coming next month. A world in the Outer Rim. They say their soil is toxic, nothing will grow. What do you think?" James asked. "I think every planet has potential," Miguel grinned. "We just have to find it." The final harvest. James Mitchell passed away quietly in his sleep at age 87, surrounded by family in the farmhouse on Kepler 442f. The planet he'd bought for almost nothing had become one of the most valuable worlds in the sector, not for its resources or strategic position, but for what it represented. His funeral was attended by thousands. Not politicians or celebrities, but farmers. They came from hundreds of worlds, bringing soil samples from their own adapted crops, a tradition that had developed over the years. Each sample was mixed into James's grave, creating a bed of earth that represented the galactic family he'd built. Emma spoke at the service, standing in fields of purple wheat under Kepler 442f's dim sun. "My father bought a worthless planet and turned it into something priceless. But his real gift wasn't teaching us how to farm. It was teaching us how to see potential where others saw nothing. How to work with nature instead of conquering it. How to think in seasons and generations instead of days and quarters." She held up a seed, dark purple, the result of 20 years of careful adaptation. "This seed contains my father's legacy. Not because it's special, but because it's adapted. It knows its home. And that's what he taught us, to find our homes, to adapt to them, to work with them, to build something sustainable and true." The harvest continues. Today, Mitchell farming is practiced on over 3,000 worlds. The Torres Institute has branches in every major system. Sustainable agriculture is no longer considered primitive but advanced, the cutting edge of ecological engineering. Kepler 442f remains the spiritual home of the movement. Farmers still come to learn, to study, to connect with the land that started it all. The original fields, where James first planted his experimental crops, are preserved as a living museum. The Galactic Agricultural Council, which once ignored sustainable farming, now requires it for any new colony. The corporations that fought against Mitchell's methods now proudly advertise their sustainable practices. The galaxy that once valued only efficiency now understands the value of resilience. And on Kepler 442f, in fields of purple wheat, young farmers from 100 species work the soil, learning the lessons James Mitchell taught. That every planet has potential. That working with nature is stronger than fighting it. That sustainability matters more than speed. The harvest continues, season after season, generation after generation. And it all started with one farmer who looked at a worthless planet and saw home.